17 years is long enough to forget the shape of your own voice. It's long enough for silence to become your only language, and long enough to learn that the world moves on, especially when it thinks you're a murderer. I remember the courtroom the way some men remember war. The cold air, the hushed crowd, the judge's bored eyes. But above it all, I remember her. Vanessa, my sister. She took the stand in black silk, a funeral dress tailored to show just enough fragility. Her hair was pinned back in soft waves. She didn't wear much makeup, but she didn't need to. She'd always been beautiful, camera-friendly, as they later called her. Her voice trembled just enough to seem brave. Not weak, not rehearsed, just believable. I loved my brother, she told the jury, her eyes brimming, lips just shy of a smile. But he was never the same after Mom changed the will. She said I was angry, said I yelled, said I threatened her. Then she dropped the final stone, delivered with a perfectly timed pause. I heard them arguing. He said if he couldn't have it all, no one would. The jury believed her. The prosecution didn't even need to push. I was the younger son, the black sheep, quiet, introverted, an easy villain with a face that didn't know how to perform grief. My lawyer tried to fight back, but the evidence was circumstantial, the motive compelling. And with Vanessa's testimony cutting through every shred of doubt, it was over before the verdict was read. Guilty. I was 28 years old, and the last thing I saw before the guards pulled me away was her face. Not crying, not smiling, just watching. Prison didn't break me, but it did bury me. For the first few years, I kept waiting for someone to realize it was all wrong. A new witness, a confession, a mistake in the paperwork. But nothing came. No appeals, no letters. Vanessa never visited. No one did. So I stopped hoping. I read everything. Law books, case studies, depositions. I traced every step that led to my conviction until I knew my trial better than the attorneys who'd tried it. I wanted to understand how she had done it, how she twisted perception, buried facts, erased our history. It wasn't just the murder. It was the precision, the strategy. She hadn't just testified. She'd written a narrative. By the time I was 10 years in, I knew what most people outside never would. Vanessa had started planning our mother's death long before it happened. She knew about the insurance policy, knew about the changes to the will. She'd even made herself executor months before that accident. I found that out from a file buried in a prison library database, tucked inside a probate record someone forgot to seal. She killed our mother, framed me, and walked free with everything. And the world loved her for it. But fate, as I learned, has a strange sense of patience. On the 16th year of my sentence, a new piece of evidence surfaced. Not because of justice, because of negligence. A sealed deposition taken from our mother's housekeeper had been misfiled. It described the argument Vanessa had with our mother the night before her death. How her mother had threatened to cut her out of the will. How Vanessa screamed, "You'll regret this tomorrow." It wasn't admissible enough to exonerate me completely, but it was enough to unravel the original conviction. A judge reviewed my case, cited legal inconsistencies, called my defense inadequate. And then, 17 years and 3 months after I entered prison, I was released. Not pardoned, not cleared, just released. No reporters waited for me outside. No apologies. No press conferences. Just an envelope with bus fare, a plastic bag of my old belongings, and the memory of Vanessa's voice ringing in my head. I loved my brother. She thought I was gone. Forgotten. A ghost buried under a crime she committed. She was wrong. I wasn't free. I was something else now. And she was going to find out what I had become. The first thing I did when I got out was disappear. Not because I was afraid. Because she couldn't see me coming. You see, revenge only works when it's patient. When it doesn't rush. When it doesn't blink. Vanessa built her life on a foundation of public sympathy and polished lies. She knew how to spin guilt into charm, tragedy into currency. I couldn't walk back into her world as the broken brother from prison. That would be useless. Predictable. So I killed him, Jasper Vale, convicted murderer, wrongfully accused, bitter and bruised. And in his place, I created someone else. I became Julian Carr. Strategic consultant, corporate fixer, conflict manager. I cut my hair, changed my posture, reshaped my speech. I studied behavioral finance, speech psychology, corporate law. I used prison to become fluent in the systems Vanessa now depended on to protect her image. I worked low-profile jobs at first. Document analysis, ghostwriting legal summaries, scrubbing public records. Slowly, I built a presence, not in headlines, but in footnotes. The kind of man people called when they had money to protect and names to keep clean. That's how I reached her. Not directly. Through her world. Vanessa had built a media empire off our tragedy. Her memoir, The Weight of Blood, spent 9 weeks on bestseller lists. She gave lectures on grief, self-reinvention, female resilience. She hosted a podcast. She dined with politicians, therapists, influencers. But she also made enemies quiet ones. Ex-staffers, ex-lovers, former colleagues who'd seen glimpses of who she really was beneath the silk and sorrow. I found them, one by one, bought them coffee, listened, waited. Then I found my opening. Her literary agency was launching a new division, image control for high-profile clients facing legal crises. I arranged a meeting with their director, a man nursing a scandal of his own. I offered my services as a private fixer, non-traditional, surgical, discreet. He asked for a test case. I took an unstable client, settled 3 lawsuits in 8 weeks, and recovered a $1.2 million contract from a disgruntled investor using nothing but 2 emails and a non-disclosure agreement. I was in. The first time I stood in the same room as her again, it was her office, top floor, modern glass, walls lined with signed photos and editorial spreads. She wore black again, like at the trial. But this time, it was sharper, intentional, expensive. She didn't recognize me. She shook my hand like I was just another hired professional. Her eyes scanned me, assessing, calculating. "You come highly recommended," she said. "I tend to be useful," I replied, calm and clipped. "Especially when someone has something worth protecting." She smiled. "I have a great deal to protect." I returned the smile. "I know." For 3 months, I worked in her orbit. I watched her, learned her patterns, listened to her calls. I reviewed her contracts, filtered her press inquiries, advised her on scandal mitigation. We became a team, in her mind. She began to trust me. She even confided in me about the weight of public trauma and how navigating fame built on loss was exhausting. She thought I was a mirror of her grief. I was her shadow. But behind the scenes, I was moving. I obtained a copy of the original police interviews, something no journalist had ever published. I found Vanessa's diary from our teenage years, hidden in the attic of our old house. She thought it had burned in the estate sale. I read every entry. The way she talked about our mother. About me. About what she'd do to have it all. It was darker than I imagined. Then came the final piece. A recorded phone call 10 years ago. Between Vanessa and our late mother's financial advisor. In it, she asked what would happen if both children were removed from the will. She asked, specifically, about accidental deaths. The audio was grainy, but clear. She never knew it existed. But I did. And I wasn't going to the police. I wasn't after justice. Justice would end her story. I wanted the story to live, to unravel, to bleed, piece by piece. She put me in a cage and smiled while the world praised her strength. Now she would feel the bars closing. And this time, the cameras would be watching her. Vanessa Vale didn't just survive the murder scandal. She reinvented herself through it. That was her real gift. Not deception, not manipulation, transmutation. She turned our mother's death into a brand. She turned my conviction into a plot line. She turned pain into PR. Her memoir sold because it read like redemption, and she sold redemption like perfume. That made her dangerous. Because people don't question the woman who turned a family tragedy into a platform for healing. They applaud her. They sponsor her. They trust her. But trust is flammable. And I had found the spark. It started small. One of her social media interns, a 22-year-old with too much ambition and too little loyalty, received an anonymous Dropbox link. Inside, Vanessa's early manuscript notes from The Weight of Blood heavily redacted sections that revealed her original tone wasn't grief. It was spite, blame. The notes included entire chapters about how her mother controlled her, how she had always planned to cut me out, and one chilling passage, maybe it's better she died before I had to watch her ruin everything. The intern posted it online. Reddit devoured it. Then came a second leak, timed precisely a week later. A podcast she recorded years ago, never aired. In it, Vanessa mocked the idea of restorative justice and said, Jasper made himself the villain. All I had to do was confirm it. She laughed. The host laughed. But when the audio dropped, no one else did. Her publicist went into crisis mode. I watched from across her office table as she stormed in, red-faced, demanding to know how this was happening. This is a smear campaign, she barked. It's worse, I said calmly. It's a narrative correction. Her sponsors began pulling out. First the skincare line, then the nonprofit that had named her Woman of the Year. The press turned. Opinion pieces surfaced. Was Vanessa Vale's grief a performance? Truth, trauma, and the business of tragedy. Old interview clips were re-examined, suddenly sinister. Her smile, once seen as stoic, now looked rehearsed. Still, she tried to regain control. She scheduled a primetime interview with a sympathetic journalist. I scheduled something better. The night before her appearance, a USB drive arrived at the newsroom. No return address. It contained the raw, unedited deposition from the housekeeper. Vanessa's last link to the truth. In it, the woman described the day before our mother's death. How Vanessa had threatened her. How she'd asked about the staircase railing. How she told the housekeeper to take the night off. The network canceled the interview. But they didn't ignore the story. They ran the footage instead, prime time, coast to coast. Vanessa watched her entire persona collapse in real time. That week, I stopped pretending. I scheduled a private meeting with her. Not as Julian Carr. As myself. She arrived late. Pale. Haggard. Designer sunglasses failing to hide the brokenness in her face. When she saw me sitting at the cafe table, she didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, stunned, as if seeing a ghost she'd convinced herself had never existed. Hello, Vanessa, I said. She sat slowly. Her hands trembled. You were dead, she whispered. I was forgotten, I corrected. But not anymore. Tears welled in her eyes. Real ones this time. What do you want? Everything, I said, my voice low. But not the way you think. She leaned back, wary. You're going to try to ruin me. I gave her a small, humorless smile. I already have. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. I'll sue, she hissed. Defamation. Stalking. Harassment. No court will hear you, I said. Because I've done what you never did. I paused. I told the truth. She froze. Then sat again, defeated. The waitress came and went. We said nothing for 5 minutes. Just silence. Then I leaned forward. I'm not going to take your house. Or your money. Or even your name. She looked up. I smiled slightly. I'm going to make sure the world sees who you are. And they're going to remember. Because for me, this was never about stealing back what she took. It was about making sure she could never hide again. The unraveling didn't happen in one violent burst. It was slow, deliberate, and excruciating. That was the beauty of it. I didn't want Vanessa to fall quickly. I wanted her to witness the collapse. To feel it every hour, from every angle. A career like hers wasn't built on one truth. It was built on carefully curated lies, repeated enough times to pass for authenticity. My job was simple. Peel them away. One at a time. The morning after our meeting, the biggest media outlet in the country ran a 2-page expose titled, Vanessa Vale, Grief Icon or Master Manipulator. They didn't cite me. They didn't have to. The evidence stood on its own. The edited podcast. The draft memoir chapters. The housekeeper's deposition. And now, witnesses began to surface. People who had stayed quiet for years because they didn't want to be the first to say what they'd always suspected. But now that the dam had cracked, the flood was inevitable. The publishing house that had launched Vanessa's book series quietly canceled her second memoir. Already written and scheduled for pre-sale. They removed her from all brand marketing. The podcast network dropped her. Streaming platforms pulled her interviews. She wasn't just losing platforms. She was losing the illusion of innocence. Vanessa tried to fight back. She released a statement claiming she was being targeted by a jealous figure from her past. She didn't name me, but the implication was clear. I smiled when I read it. Not because I was offended, because I knew what came next. The footage. I had waited to release it until she spoke first. Now, the time was perfect. A single, silent video dropped on an anonymous account. It showed her in a private conversation with our family's former legal advisor. She didn't know it had been recorded. She never knew her assistant had left the dictation device running in her briefcase. In it, Vanessa talks about the aftermath of our mother's death. No one ever questions a woman crying on a stand. It's practically gospel. All I had to do was cry at the right time. That line became viral within hours. It was posted, reposted, turned into TikToks, Reels, hashtags. Hashtag cry at the right time trended for days. Public sympathy inverted. Where there had once been admiration, there was now disgust. The soft-spoken survivor image was gone, and in its place stood something much uglier. Her sponsors didn't just leave. They sued. 2 companies filed breach of ethics claims, demanding repayment for promotional campaigns she knowingly profited from through false representation. A former intern came forward, detailing Vanessa's threats to destroy her career if she ever mentioned the unedited manuscript. Even one of her co-authors turned on her, calling her a parasite of tragedy. I didn't speak publicly. I never appeared on camera. I let the narrative run itself. I had set the truth free. And truth, when timed properly, is lethal. The day her book was officially pulled from shelves, Vanessa made a live stream. It was 15 minutes of damage control, desperate apologies, shaky explanations, claims of being misunderstood, and taken out of context. But her audience was no longer listening. They were remembering. And just when it seemed like she might retreat into obscurity, the final blow landed. The state reopened the case. Not against me. Against her. The original testimony, the altered timeline, the manipulated financial records, they triggered a full-scale reinvestigation into our mother's death. A warrant was issued for the documents Vanessa never thought anyone would find. Her face, once framed in soft-lighted interviews and morning show laughter, now appeared beneath the words. New evidence suggests Vanessa Vale may have lied under oath. She called me, of course. Blocked number. Middle of the night. Her voice, stripped of control. Why are you doing this? I didn't raise my voice. Because you took 17 years from me. I was a kid, she said. I didn't know what I was doing. No, Vanessa, I said slowly. You knew exactly what you were doing. And then I hung up, not out of rage, but because there was nothing left to say. She returned to the estate alone. The same house where it all began, once a place of sprawling lawns, garden parties, our mother's string quartets on Sunday mornings. Now it sat quiet, surrounded by silence and ivy, a carcass of memory. Vanessa had held on to it as a trophy, a monument to her carefully manufactured survival. But as the world turned against her, it became a cell. And like all cages, it waited for its prisoner. She hadn't been formally charged yet. The investigation was still underway. But the court of public opinion had already passed judgment. Her name was synonymous with betrayal. Her fortune was frozen, her sponsors gone, her media presence wiped. Even the nonprofit she founded in our mother's name removed her from the board and issued a public apology. Her mask had been shattered. All that was left now was what she feared most. The truth. And me. She didn't expect me to come. But when she opened the front door and saw me standing there, she didn't flinch. She looked tired. Older. Her eyes were dark hollows. No makeup. No press-ready glow. Just skin and bone and silence. I thought you wanted to destroy me, she said. I did, I replied. And I did. We stood in the foyer. The walls were bare now. The oil paintings gone. The chandeliers dim. The house felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I wasn't the one shrinking anymore. I lost everything, she whispered. No, I said quietly. You lost everyone. There's a difference. She looked down. Her hands trembled slightly. Her voice cracked. I didn't think you'd survive it. I didn't, I replied. Jasper Vale didn't survive. He died in a prison cell. A long pause followed. She nodded, slowly, as if acknowledging a gravestone. Then, for the first time in her life, Vanessa did something I'd never seen her do. She wept. Not for the cameras. Not for the crowd. Just her and the truth. I'm sorry, she said. I was scared. I thought Mom was going to ruin me. She tried to save you, I said. Even at the end. I know. Her sobs echoed in the empty hall. I didn't comfort her. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew that grief wasn't the punishment. Living with everything she'd done, while the world watched in disgust, that was the justice no court could deliver. As I turned to leave, she called out one last time. What do I do now? I paused at the threshold. You live, I said. You live with it. Every day. Every headline. Every whisper. That's how this ends. And then I walked out. The sky outside was cloudless. Blue. Uncomplicated. For 17 years, I imagined vengeance would feel like fire. Hot. Explosive. Final. But it didn't. It felt like silence. Like the kind of peace you only find when the lie that buried you is finally 6 feet under. She framed me for murder. She built a life out of my ashes. But now, I'd left her in the ruins of her own making. And I wasn't going back. She framed him. He came back and took everything. If you want more stories where betrayal burns and revenge leaves a mark, subscribe now and hit the bell icon. This is just one ending. We've got plenty more that'll chill your blood and make you cheer.